Okay, so now we're ready to go. So I'm going to tell you very briefly a little bit about my story. And then Michael put sort of the topic, where do we go from here? And the whole idea is to start to explore from the community point of view, where we go from here. So in terms of my story, that's relevant here. So actually, I have a son who's got a rare genetic disorder. So that's sort of how I got roped into this whole life that a number of us here have. So I'll actually, how many people remember the day they got the diagnosis or about themselves or their child? Yeah, it's one of those days you'll never forget. For me, it was actually on my 30th birthday. So my son had been born 3 weeks earlier. And from the minute he was born, we knew there were some problems, there was complications, he was in the ICU, he was very floppy as a baby. And 3 weeks later, we were at McMaster Hospital. And if anyone knows McMaster Hospital, it's a teaching hospital. So we got called into the boardroom, literally on my 30th birthday. And this was to enjoy the experience of teaching people at McMaster how to tell a family that their son has a rare genetic diagnosis. So I was sitting there, and to my left was the geneticist, and then there was the chief of pediatrics, then were a few pediatric residents, there was the head nurse, a few nurse residents, all the way around the table, and my wife was sitting to my right. I remember sitting there, and the geneticist turned to us, and he said, well, your son has Prader-Willi syndrome. And of course, I turned around and said, okay, well, what does that mean? Having no idea. So he went on to explain, and he basically said that his growth is going to be delayed, his speech is going to be delayed, he's never going to be able to have children, and he is literally always going to be hungry. And I remember my mind was just sort of spinning, trying to process that, and my wife to my right is starting to cry, and I'm just trying to find like that shred of hope to figure out, how we're going to get through this. And I said, well, what about his cognitive abilities? Because I haven't heard anything about that. And he said, well, those are going to be delayed as well. And so that was our entrance into this world of rare diseases. And I remember later on that evening, we were staying over at the hospital, and we were in the hospital room, my wife and I, and we were crying and trying to make sense of this. And my wife says, well, what's going to happen? And my answer to her, for whatever reason, is I said, you know what, things are going to be okay. And she says, well, how do you know what's going to happen? And I said, I have no idea what is going to happen. But I do know that right now, we actually have a choice to make. So we can choose to believe that we're going to get through this. We can choose to believe that we can make a difference in our son's life, or we can choose to believe that it's over. And that choice that we make tonight is going to actually impact our lives going forward. And what I can tell you is, of all the things that have gone on, it is probably that single decision that I can start drawing back a lot of the success that we've had to that night making that decision. So a little while later, we knew we wanted to get involved. We knew we wanted to do something. We had no idea what we were going to do. And I remember coming back from work, and so Dante was probably about 3 or 4 months old by that point. And I came home, and my wife said, okay, well, I booked a park. We're going to run a walk. We said, okay, we're going to run a walk. We had no idea about fundraising, not-for-profit, research, any of these types of things, but we said we're going to run a walk. So what we did is we had actually just got married, probably about 2 years earlier. So we actually still had our wedding list. So we said, this is great. So we got our wedding list, this was like early on, so there wasn't a lot of sort of online fundraising. But we basically emailed all our friends and family that we had from the wedding list and said, hey, this is the situation. Here's the date. We're running a walk. And we went out to raise about $15,000. We had no idea what we were going to do with that, but we wanted to raise $15,000. It's good to have a goal. And I remember that day, when we started seeing sort of friend after friend and family after family show up, we ended up raising $50,000 in our first walk. And it was just, and this is actually the check of the day. That's my little guy, Dante. He's 10 years old now. But that was him. He was about 10 months old at that time. And it's again, another day that I'll never forget. And that was really the beginning. We called our walk the One Small Step Walk for a couple reasons. One, actually, kids with Prader-Willi actually have very small feet. And the initial logo, you can see there, was actually his foot. So we took his foot, kind of stamped it on the logo, and we said, we're good, we're done. We have a much more professional logo now. But it was also about saying, we have no idea about all this stuff that's going to happen, it's going to do, but we know that we can take one small step. We know we can do this. And that's why we called it One Small Step. And the next thing is I can actually show you, fast forward, this is a picture. We ended up building our own fundraising site. And this is the year that we crossed raising $1 million. So we actually run this walk that we started at Centennial Park, just over here. We actually now run it in 72 different countries, 72 different cities in 7 different countries around the world. And we'll raise over $1.5 million a year. We've probably raised over $6-7 million now since when we've been doing that. And again, that comes back to really the 2 things that I talk about is making that choice to believe and then actually taking that one small step. It's interesting, so we have our little t-shirts, our One Small Step t-shirts, and they've kind of sort of spread all over. So this is actually the real shack. It's not just sort of a stand-up guy taking a picture. And I actually remember we were down in Cuba, and we were sitting there on vacation. It was the afternoon, we were eating, and I actually see this guy walk by with like One Small Step t-shirt. And so I had to chase him down. I said, how did you get that t-shirt? But it's amazing how these little things that we do, start to spread when we take that small step. And the last story I'm going to share with you related to that is the story of Gretchen, so a mom of a child with a rare disease. And she's got this beautiful quote. And the reason I'm sharing this is because we see this year after year. And I've now talked with a number of families with a number of other rare disease groups, and we see this consistently where a family member, a lot of times it's a mom, but will show up at our conference at the beginning, and it's like they're a deer in the headlights. And they've got those big eyes, they just got the diagnosis, their child's got this rare disease, they have no idea what to do. And then fast forward literally 6 months, 8 months later, they're actually running fundraisers, raising 20, 50, 60. We actually had a first-year walk, raise over $80,000. And this quote from Gretchen really seems to sum it up, where she says, having a child with a rare disease required me to redefine myself, and I lost a part of myself in the process. And hosting a walk forced me to step outside of my comfort zone, but when the walk was over, I realized I found a part of me that I thought was gone, and I got my mojo back. And I think I've talked to a number of different groups of rare disease, and it really seems to be that common theme where you get that diagnosis, you think things are over, you stop believing in your life, but as soon as you take that step through, then you get your mojo back. And I think that is one of the things that's actually driven a lot of your success from an organization, is right where you've been, is you actually have a very, very clear focus. And when I talk to groups, I actually say, first of all, your mission can't be larger than 10 words, because otherwise people start forgetting what you're about. But I think one of the challenges or one of the questions that your group, your community is going to start to have is, and this is sort of the where do we go from here, is what else do you want to do? And the answer actually could be nothing. So raise your hand, how many people describe that you are unlucky being in a bank getting shot? How many, so you don't think that's unlucky?
Yeah, I think so.
You do, yes. Yes, of course it's unlucky. Do you know how many banks there are? There's thousands of banks. There's 50 people in the bank, and you got shot. I can't believe you guys don't think you're unlucky.
Okay, ask again.
Oh, okay, let's try that again. How many people think you're unlucky? Okay, so who didn't raise their hand? Who thinks they're lucky? Who thinks they're lucky? Who's the crazy people that think they're lucky?
I think you're lucky.
George.
You could have got shot in the head.
Exactly. Could be worse.
Of course you're lucky. I can't believe you said you're unlucky. You didn't get shot in the head. You You are definitely lucky. I can't believe you guys got that all wrong. The whole room. But the interesting part is, it actually doesn't matter. So I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. But the interesting thing is, the fact is, you got shot. Right? That's the fact. That's the only fact that we know. You got shot. Now, after that, that's an interpretation. Right? You're interpreting the word, I'm lucky. You're interpreting the word, I'm unlucky.
It's like dealing with the disease.
Right? And it's an interesting thing. So I have a child who's got a rare disease. Right? I got the diagnosis. That's a fact. Now, do I feel that I'm lucky or do I feel that I'm unlucky? That's now my belief about the situation. That's my interpretation. Now, where it gets more interesting is there is actually consequences to making those decisions. And this is something do you guys know Martin Seligman on the bottom right there? Psychologist. So he's what they broadly speaking refer as sort of the father of positive psychology. So psychology typically looked at all the things that are bad about people, and Martin came along and said, why don't we actually look at what's good about people? And he started this positive psychology. And one of the things that he started talking about is, we've all heard about post-traumatic stress. And he actually started looking and investigating, researching into post-traumatic growth, which is a really interesting concept. And he's actually proved that he sees post-traumatic growth in a number of people that actually go through a traumatic experience. But not everybody. It's not just automatically you go through a traumatic experience and you grow. And so he started breaking it down and looking at what he called his ABCD model, which I'm going to walk you through quickly. So the first one is the adverse event. You know, the bad event, but you know, they're psychologists, so they call it the adverse event. So my son has a rare genetic disorder. That's the fact. You, George, you got shot in the arm. Right? That's the fact. That happened. So the second thing is the belief. What do you choose to believe about that situation? You choose to believe you're lucky, you're unlucky. So in our case, we actually work with a lot of different families that actually say, look, my child has a rare genetic disorder, my life is over. So in our case, kids with Prader-Willi, they literally are never full. So they'll eat a meal and they will continue eating to the extent that you have to lock the fridges, or else they'll go into the fridge at night, and you have to lock the doors, or else they'll break out and go outside and try and forage for food, because they feel like they're starving. We have some treatments and drugs on the way, so we're going to take care. But you get that diagnosis and you think, that's it. Like, I can't go out for dinner. I'm not going to be able to travel. My wife's Greek, so that's no more big fat Greek weddings, because there's food everywhere, no more family events. My life's over. Now that's a belief. Now, the thing is, if you make that choice, then there's a consequence. And that's the C. And what happens? Well, you don't go out for dinner. You don't go to family events. You don't go to any more big fat Greek weddings. And basically, your life is over. Now, it's not the adverse event that caused that, but that's my belief. So now, if you go the other way and you actually say, look, you know, we can make a difference, and that's the choice that we make. We can make a difference in our child's life. We can make a difference in my own life. We can make a difference in the aHUS community. You make that choice, then all of a sudden you start looking for solutions. So if I say, great, actually, we can make a difference. Now I say, okay, how can I actually go out to dinner with our family? I know he's got Prader-Willi, I know he's got this issue, but all of a sudden I'm looking for solutions. And I can tell you, we go out for dinner all the time. And there's a number of different things that we figured out how to manage the situation because we actually were looking for it. But probably the most important part of this is the D. Right? So people will say, but okay, maybe I've made that choice that my life is over, maybe I don't even know I've made that choice. How do I change that? Because it's great in theory, that's awesome, but if I'm feeling like my life is over, I need to change that. And the way is basically to find what Martin Seligman calls a disputation. So something that proves that your belief isn't true. And in some cases, it can be very simple. If you're saying that your life is over, all you need to do is go out and find one family who's going out to dinner with their child with chronic relapse. One person who's dealing with aHUS effectively. And now you actually know it's possible. So once you get that disputation, you give yourself a chance to make a different decision, to choose a different belief. And once you make that different belief, then you're going to have a different consequence. Does that make sense? Sounds good? Okay. So that's next big question. Who can tell me who this band is? The Cure, yes, round of applause. So this is an interesting word when you start talking in the rare disease space. And Sue was actually talking about it a little bit earlier. A cure. So a couple years ago, not a few years ago, if you actually mentioned cure in terms of a genetic disorder, then you were like, strapped and pushed out of the room. You cannot talk about a cure. But now we actually do have cures for a few genetic disorders. We actually have cures. People are talking about genetic gene therapy, gene replacement therapy, potential for. So what do you believe about that? Do you believe it's possible? Is it just false hope talking about a cure? Can you honestly say in your lifetime you're going to be able to get a cure?
Even if we don't know for sure, why shouldn't we hope for it? Or should we work towards it?
And get closer to a cure, because who knows how long we're gonna live?
Because if we have the attitude that it's not possible, we might as well give up. We don't try.
So did you guys read the next slide? Or what? But it's interesting. So this is an interesting model. And what my advice is, and what I always talk about, is you need to be able to find something that resonates with yourself, that you can say, you can stand up in front of your whole community with integrity and say, we are here looking for a cure. And that's our mission. And they're like 100% all in, that's their belief. Perfect. But that's kind of, for some people, that's a difficult thing to say. So in terms of Prader-Willi syndrome, I'm not sure if I'm saying, 100% believe we're going to find a cure. It's possible. I'm there, but I don't know. But if you start taking one step down the pyramid, the next thing is to say, well, what if we're focusing on eliminating a challenge? And then I think all of a sudden everybody's like, well, of course we can eliminate a challenge. We just listed a couple slides ago all those challenges of aHUS, and you're telling me we can't eliminate like one of those challenges? And if we can do that for ourselves or for our children, then I'm all in. I can stand up, I can say with integrity that that's what we're here for. That's what we're going for. But even if you can't say that, and I heard somebody say this word, I think it was Michael, even if you can't say that, if you take one step down, say, I'm not saying we're going to do it, but I can tell you for sure it's possible. And at that point, almost everybody can get on board in your whole community and say, it's possible. And then all of a sudden, and we've seen this from a fundraising point of view, we've seen this from a community organization point of view, the number one reason why people aren't involved and they're not pushing and they're not doing it is because they are afraid. And it's not afraid in a bad thing, but they don't think it's possible. And why are you going to spend all your time and effort to go out there, bang your head against the wall for something that's not possible? As soon as you get your community to the point that everyone says, look, it's possible that we could eliminate these challenges, it's possible potentially that we could get a cure, whatever your words are, then all of a sudden the doors open up. Because I can tell you as a parent, if it's possible that I can eliminate one of these challenges for my son, I'm all in. I am all in. If I can help my son, and parents around the world do the same thing, they do it every day. If it's possible, of course I'm going to help them. So the reason is people don't think it's possible. And as a community, that's your objective, to start spreading that word throughout the community, saying this is our mission. We're going to go out and eliminate these challenges and get people to really believe that it's possible to do that. So we're going to take the first step right now, and Marguerite is going to start. We have a prize for this. You guys ready for a prize? Yes? You have to clap though. You ready for a prize? So we're actually going to hand out what we call our Make Your Mark sign-up sheet. So the way this works is you get your little sheet. Everyone who fills it in gets their name in a draw for our handy-dandy little prize. And what we're asking people is to actually go out and start to make your mark on the community. And what we found, as we're handing out these sheets, is it really comes down to taking that first one small step. Because a lot of times people say, look, I can't get access for this drug. I can't find a cure. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a politician. I'm not into advocacy. But when you start looking out across the community, as people start to take that small step in terms of what they can do, then all of a sudden it starts to add up. And one thing I will caution you, because I see this happen all the time, if you don't like golf, do not sign up to host a golf tournament. And we kind of laugh at it, but it happens so many times where everyone's like, okay, I'm ready to get involved, I want to do something, I want to help us in one of these challenges, and the right thing to do is run a golf tournament, because that's what people do. You can raise a lot of money, even though they hate golf. But if you look at it the other way and say, hey, look, I love golf, that's just what I do, hey, golf tournament may be a great thing to do. If that's what you're passionate about, you've always wanted to do something like that, now you can start to use the skills that you have to actually help this community. And when you start looking at, here's the overall mission, and everybody in the community starts signing up to actually say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, all of a sudden you've now started to create a movement. All of a sudden you start to create a groundswell of momentum. And all of a sudden these challenges start to get knocked off the list. I can tell you, we launched a registry recently, and after a number of years, our community now is so jacked up. It's not about people not getting involved. We actually talk about, hey, we're launching a registry, we want to get a lot of people. We have almost 500 people sign up within weeks. People are there, ready to go to do their part to drive the community forward to the mission. And if there's other things on here that you'd like to help out with, then just write on there. Don't worry about it, just go through, put it on there.